For half a century, the Jackson name stood for American music royalty. But genetic testing conducted in the years following Michael Jackson's death revealed ancestry that contradicted decades of assumptions. DNA evidence confirmed Cameroonian, Beninese, Ghanaian, and unexpected European genetic markers that reshape the story of where the Jackson family truly came from. The findings do not just trace geography. They expose hidden family decisions, migration paths that official records never captured, and cultural complexity that fame kept buried. How did this ancestry stay invisible for so long? And what does it tell us about the identity Michael Jackson carried his entire life? In 2010, researchers at African Ancestry Inc. analyzed genetic samples linked to the Jackson family line. The laboratory isolated mitochondrial DNA, passed unchanged from mother to child through generations, and identified haplogroup L2A1, a marker predominantly found in populations from West and Central Africa. The team then cross-referenced this profile against comprehensive African genetic databases containing thousands of regional samples. The results pointed to 3 specific regions with statistical confidence: Cameroon's Tikar people, Benin's Fon communities, and Ghana's southern coastal populations. This was not speculation. The mitochondrial signature matched living populations in these exact areas, with frequency patterns that ruled out coincidence. The laboratory conducted multiple verification tests, comparing the genetic sequence against control samples to eliminate any possibility of contamination. Each test returned the same result, pointing to the same 3 West African populations with identical frequency distributions. The precision of the match indicated direct maternal descent, not distant or diluted ancestry. Autosomal DNA results from separate testing reinforced the maternal findings while adding unexpected data points. The genetic profile showed markers consistent with Central African ancestry, but also revealed segments associated with Western European populations, particularly from regions in Belgium and the Netherlands. The presence of these markers, while smaller in proportion, was definitive enough to indicate admixture within the past 6 to 8 generations. The timing was significant. 6 to 8 generations traced back to the mid-1800s, placing the admixture squarely within the slavery era in the American South. The combination of maternal African markers and autosomal European segments created a profile that was more complex than public narratives allowed. Official Jackson family history traced the name to slave-owning families in Alabama and Arkansas, but the DNA evidence demanded a deeper look at maternal lines that carried stories the documents never recorded. The Jackson surname entered the family through enslavement, not bloodline. Samuel Jackson, a white plantation owner in Alabama during the 1840s, held dozens of enslaved people on his property. Among them was a woman whose name does not appear in surviving records. She gave birth to a son around 1850, a child who would carry the Jackson name into freedom, but inherit none of the man's genetic legacy. Census records from 1870 show this son, now free, listed as a Jackson. The surname was not chosen. It was assigned, a mark of ownership that persisted after emancipation. DNA evidence confirms there is no genetic link between Samuel Jackson and the paternal line that produced Michael. The name is a historical artifact, a remnant of a system that separated identity from ancestry. The implications extend beyond one family. If Michael Jackson's paternal line carries no Jackson DNA, then the surname represents not heritage, but historical trauma, a reminder that millions of African American families carry the names of enslavers, not ancestors. The practice was widespread. Formerly enslaved families across the South carried the surnames of the men who owned them, creating genealogical confusion that DNA testing is only now beginning to untangle. For the Jackson family, the surname became part of the public identity, but the actual genetic lineage traces back to African and European ancestors whose names were never written down. Tracing Michael Jackson's maternal line requires following fragments: birth certificates, marriage licenses, and census documents for Black families in the post-Civil War South are incomplete at best. The 1880 census lists members of the Jackson household in Fountain Hill, Arkansas, but offers no indication of maternal ancestry beyond a single generation. The gaps are not accidental. Record-keeping for formerly enslaved people was inconsistent, often non-existent, especially in rural areas where the Jackson family settled after emancipation. Oral history within the family, as reported by relatives in interviews spanning the 1980s through early 2000s, references a matriarch described as having Choctaw heritage. The claim has been repeated but never substantiated through tribal enrollment records or independent documentation. DNA testing has not supported Native American ancestry at detectable levels. What the genetic evidence does confirm is a strong maternal connection to West Africa, specifically the Tikar, Fon, and coastal Ghanaian populations identified in the 2010 analysis. The Tikar people, concentrated in Cameroon's northwestern region, have a recorded history of migration and trade that brought them into contact with coastal slave trading networks by the 18th century. The Fon, based in what is now Benin, were central to the Kingdom of Dahomey, which played a direct role in the transatlantic slave trade. Between 1700 and 1850, the Kingdom of Dahomey captured and sold an estimated 10,000 people annually to European traders at coastal ports. Ghanaian coastal groups, particularly the Akan subgroups, were among the most frequently trafficked populations during the height of the trade. Records from British and Dutch trading posts document the systematic removal of Akan people from the Gold Coast region throughout the 18th century. The genetic markers place Michael's maternal ancestors within these communities, likely captured or sold during the period between 1700 and 1850. From there, the path leads to plantations in Alabama and Arkansas, where names were erased and family lines fragmented. The DNA carries the evidence that documents could not preserve. Each genetic marker functions as a historical record, more durable than paper, more precise than memory. In addition to African maternal markers, autosomal testing revealed European genetic segments consistent with ancestry from Belgium and the Netherlands. These segments appear at levels suggesting admixture occurring within the past 150 to 200 years, likely during the slavery era or immediately after. The historical context is clear. Belgian and Dutch traders were active in the transatlantic slave trade, operating out of ports in the Caribbean and along the Gulf Coast. But the admixture in Michael's DNA most likely occurred on American soil, through relationships between enslaved women and European or European-descended men. The power dynamics of these relationships were not relationships at all. They were expressions of control, exploitation, and violence. Enslaved women had no legal rights over their own bodies, no ability to consent, and no protection from assault by white men who owned them or managed the plantations where they worked. The genetic evidence does not name individuals, but it confirms that European ancestry entered the Jackson line through circumstances that were anything but voluntary. This is not heritage in the celebratory sense. It is the biological record of systemic brutality. The DNA segments function as forensic evidence of historical crimes that were never prosecuted, never acknowledged, and deliberately erased from official family narratives. For Michael Jackson, the revelation carried weight that fame could not soften. He spoke often of pride in his Black identity, but also wrestled publicly with the way his appearance changed over the years. Vitiligo, a skin condition he confirmed in interviews, altered his pigmentation beginning in the early 1980s. Medical records and photographs document the progression of depigmentation across his face and hands. Rhinoplasty and other procedures reshaped his features. The public questioned his choices. Tabloids accused him of wanting to appear white. Critics suggested he was rejecting his racial identity. The DNA evidence suggests the complexity went deeper than aesthetics. His ancestry was a mosaic shaped by violence, migration, and survival. the African heritage connected him to specific populations with documented histories. The European segments represented trauma encoded in his DNA, passed down through generations of women who had no choice in the matter. His physical appearance, altered by disease and medical procedures, became a lightning rod for debates about racial authenticity, debates that ignored the genetic reality he inherited. In 1993, during the Oprah Winfrey interview, watched by 90 million people, Michael addressed the scrutiny directly. He affirmed his racial identity and rejected suggestions that he was attempting to distance himself from it. He explained the vitiligo diagnosis, showed photographs documenting the skin condition, and expressed frustration that his truth was constantly questioned. The DNA results, released years after his death, add another layer. They confirm African roots through multiple regional markers and expose the European ancestry that came through trauma, not choice. The evidence does not resolve the public debate over Michael's relationship with his appearance, but it does make clear that his genetic inheritance was as complicated as the history that produced it. The same DNA that connects him to Cameroon and Benin also carries the trace of exploitation that shaped the African diaspora in America. He carried both legacies in his body, whether the public understood that complexity or not. Today, genetic testing is rewriting family histories across the African American community. What was hidden by slavery's refusal to document Black ancestry is now being recovered one profile at a time. Michael Jackson's DNA is part of that larger story. It reflects the forced migrations, the violence, the survival, and the truth that fame can neither erase nor simplify. The genetic markers connect millions of African Americans to specific regions, specific peoples, and specific histories that official records deliberately obscured. Each DNA test is an act of recovery, pulling names and origins out of the silence that slavery imposed and that subsequent generations maintained.